Hey, John Lenz here. Welcome to another episode of our Green Velvet Chat series where we meet with business leaders and discuss only important things in these lovely green velvet chairs. Joined today by the venerable Sue Serna. Hi, Sue. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got to where you are currently?
Sure. It's a long and winding road. I started my life as a professional as a reporter for daily newspapers, and I covered the topic of retail and shopping and consumer trends for like 10 years. And then we moved to Minnesota for personal reasons, and I kind of went looking for other opportunities that maybe weren't journalism, and I ended up in the new and exciting world of social media. I worked at Cargill, as you know, across town here. Was on the Cargill social media team for 9 years, ended up leading it for a couple of years, and then left 4 years ago and started Serna Social. So somehow that all combines into being a consumer and social media expert.
Absolutely. And we've known each other for almost a decade.
We sure have.
Tell us about what Serna Social specializes in, what your sweet spots are. Give us an overview.
Yep, so Serna Social is a specialty social media agency. I'm not the agency you call when you want somebody to press the button and post your thing on Facebook, right? I am the person you call when you need help with large strategy, when you need help with training or, train the trainer or implementation kind of things. I'm a tool expert. And then I really focus on governance, risk control, safety of your social media, because it's something that most companies completely overlook until there's a crisis.
Absolutely. I know that there's some war stories that we've shared. Does that positioning and your experience lend itself to a specific set of clients?
Yeah.
Or what is your ideal client?
I mean, I have clients that run the gamut, from individual people who have businesses all the way up to Fortune 500s and mega huge companies. Most of my business comes from the larger companies, because it tends to be the larger enterprises that really get in the weeds of what I call the Wild West. Absolutely. With social, right? You've got hundreds of accounts, you have hundreds of people managing them, and it becomes a really big thing to control. It's not to say that smaller companies don't have the same exact problems, they're just on a smaller scale. So,
you're currently, finalizing an audit for a client. How many rogue channels have you found?
Yeah, we're up to 900 and some as of this morning. That's not atypical in any way.
That's a beefy spreadsheet.
Yes, so I am an Excel master, you better believe it. But it is, it's really interesting to me when you talk to large corporations like that about doing an audit, because the first thing you have to do is audit their known universe, right? So what do they know about? What channels are they aware of? Usually someone has a half-complete spreadsheet somewhere, right? Someone's made an effort, but there's no real control and no real master list, no nothing, right? So the first thing to do is audit the known universe and see what's wrong there. And then you go to, what do we not know about, right? So it's really two different types of auditing, but when you do them both and add it together, then you have the full picture of how much Wild West there is to clean up, right? And it can take several years to get it all cleaned up, but it's well worth the effort, because it's your brand.
Yep. I think it speaks to governance, but also you take a highly matrixed organization with multiple business units, multiple channels per business unit,
geographic regions,
multiple geographic regions. So that 900 number seems really large and kind of intimidating, but when you kind of stratify it out, you can kind of see it's easy to get.
I get that question a lot. How can a company have 400 social media channels? And it's really easy is the answer. You think about a company like 3M, right? They have 3M Inc. channels, and then they have Scotch channels and Post-it channels, and then they have to figure out, do we do them in multiple languages? Do we have versions in Spanish? Do we have, and it becomes this huge unwieldy thing really fast.
So let's talk more about governance. What are some of the biggest challenges as it relates to governance that you're seeing in the space and with your clients?
If I was capable of doing a cartwheel, which I'm not, I would get up and do a cartwheel right now for attention and say, resources and budget. That's the problem, right?
I feel like we should.
No, I cannot. Never. Not even since childhood.
I can do a cartwheel.
Well, I can't.
We'll do a cartwheel.
All right. But yeah, it's like people Right now, companies are in a really weird place with social media. Even like big Fortune 500 companies. I can't tell you how many Fortune 500 clients of mine have a team of one doing social. And it is a travesty, but it's just the way it is right now. Most large companies have a team of one, and that means that poor person is ripping their hair out, working 7 days a week, and they're just trying to keep the lights on, and so governance falls by the wayside. And the other thing that happens at large companies is what I call a gap in understanding. So there is social over here, who typically is like one person, right? Just putting the fires out and trying to make it to the end of the day. And then you've got IT and compliance and InfoSec and legal, and they're all over here like blissfully oblivious to what it takes to run social. And if I'm talking to any CTOs or CIOs, unaware of the fact that your social team is managing 600 to 2,000 individual identities. Think email addresses associated with all those accounts, people's password managers, all that's being managed by your social team with no oversight, no governance, no SOPs, no legal, no compliance, and it's kind of this weird gap that happens because social is just too busy being busy, and these guys don't even know that there's a question to be asked, and then some security incident happens and the whole thing hits the fan, and and then they call me. But it's like, at big companies, that gap prevents any progress. And it's not because anyone has bad intention. It's literally that the social team is too busy to raise their hand and go, we need to address this. And all those other people don't know it's a problem. Companies need to understand that social media is work, right? There is still this notion at a lot of companies that we can give social to the youngest person because they're young, right?
Common fallacy.
We can give social to the admin to do on top of her day job. We can give social to someone else to do on top of their day job, right? That thinking is still really prevalent, just in general for social, which is why Fortune 500 still have teams of one. It's really interesting to me. I get brought in by a lot of big companies to do their global corporate level social strategy because their one person doesn't have the experience and the depth to do that, right? They hire a junior or mid-level person because they don't scope the job correctly at a director level. And then the person is not equipped to do director level work, but they're asked to, right? And so there's a massive resourcing alignment that has to happen across the board for social. People like me who have been in the industry for 10 or 12 years, which let's keep in mind, social is only 20 years old. MySpace was founded in 2003. But it is really, truly like someday the companies are going to have to understand that just like HR, accounting, any other big department, you can't just say, we'll have one person and just see if they can do it, right? Like, not going to happen.
So, at the behest of Sue, please don't relegate your social media and governance efforts to one person or to an intern. Prioritize them, pay attention to them. It is a touch point of your brand. I'll add on to that. I think one thing that we're seeing a lot with our clients is this notion, that's kind of it isn't necessarily a hot take, but users want to engage with people, not necessarily with brands.
True.
So more and more we're working and advising executives or other key stakeholders and creating like a governance and strategy where they can kind of play in their own sandbox and have a slightly different POV that amplifies and supports the master brand, but the master brand can still stay a little bit more consistent. But yeah, please, social media is important. Don't let it fall on an under-resourced intern.
One interesting trend, though, is I am starting to see the companies that do get it create governance roles, like full-time governance roles. Really? And sometimes they're positioned as like, tool stack manager / governance, but like I'm seeing them start to come. The first one I saw was a couple years ago. I think it was Boston Scientific. But I've noticed a steady trickle, and I think they're coming because the tool stack has gotten ridiculous related to social. Any social team worth their salt is managing at least 8 tools, if not more, and it's like you have to be a tool expert. You have to manage all those vendor relationships. You have to deal with the RFPs. I mean, this is what I mean. The one social person is completely overloaded, right?
In terms of measurement, what are some of the things that you're seeing helping clients adequately report on the efficacy of their work with social, or also be able to measure like governance and security?
It's still amazing to me how many shops are still really obsessed with impressions. Like, I'm just like, dude, impressions are done. Like, stop looking at them.
I think
you
we're
know?
going to get a lot of impressions of this video.
Woohoo! Let's see if they engage.
Yeah.
No, it's one of those things that I try to drive home with a lot of C-suite level leaders. You know, it's like, it's the equivalent, this is what I always tell people, it's the equivalent of the Star Tribune here in town saying we have a circulation of 300,000 households. If there's an article about your company on page D1, that doesn't mean 300,000 people read it.
Yeah.
Right? That's impressions. So, you know, engagement rate is still king in terms of which content is performing best. When I do content audits for clients, I'm evaluating which format works, which headline works, which type of copy works, which alt head works, right? Like I'm looking at all of those aspects of each post so that I can then come out with data that says, this is your most successful format, do more of that, right? You're seeing a lot of success with carousel slideshow type things on LinkedIn, so do more of those, right? Like, and so from content, it's all about zeroing in on the magic formula that works best for your specific audience. With governance, the first step is to, as Susie Orman says, stand in your truth. Do you know Susie Orman?
I do.
Okay, so Susie Orman, financial advisor. She talks with people who are in serious amounts of debt about standing in their truth.
Remember, she always talks like this. Love you, Susie.
You have to stand in your truth, yes. So she's talking about that in the terms of debt, but I talk about it in terms of social media with companies. Companies have a very big tendency to stick their head in the sand and go like, we know social media is a problem, but we just don't want to deal with it, right? And so you can't do that. You have to stand in your truth. That's number one. You gotta know how bad it is, right? And so that's when you do that first audit, right? And you go, okay, how bad is it? What does it look like? And within that audit, you're going to audit all kinds of things like, is the profile picture okay? Is the cover picture okay? Does the URL that's listed go to a good place?
Are
is
the
it
summaries
weird?
consistent?
Yeah,
across
exactly,
channels?
right? So you're evaluating all of that when you do one of these audits. And then once you have that baseline, you can go back and redo the audit and measure your success, right? You know, okay, we had 100 channels that had a bad profile pic and we brought that down to 2. You know, we had 300 channels that we did not have control over, and now we've got 2/3 of them. You know, like you can measure your success based on those metrics for we have made our universe less risky, more safe, and more under control.
I appreciate how you frame that because, as you've indicated, like an audit for a large enterprise company is going to reveal a lot of issues.
It does. It's usually quite flabbergasting when I present the results.
But it's also, and we like to frame our efforts with clients this way, similarly, like crawl, walk, run. Like we're not gonna solve this overnight. We're not gonna flip a switch unless you really, really want to pay us an insane amount of money. We could try. But like, yeah, let's just reduce your risk and mitigate it over time. I think that's really, really helpful and probably appetizing to C-suite executives too.
Well, and the truth is, it's the only way to do it because most of these companies have they've just let it go so far that it is a true hot mess. And it's like, well, you can't make efforts to like consolidate your brand presence and your voice and your messaging until you just get control of everything. Yeah. Like that's step one.
It also does take time, experience-based feedback. Sue, we worked together, and I think it took our team about a year to reclaim a rogue Polish YouTube channel.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
And like, it's a hurry up and wait thing. Like you're reaching out, escalating, whatever.
Well, you're always at the you are always at the mercy of the support teams of the platform that you are dealing with.
Yeah.
We'll just say that.
And you try to play nice, be super responsive and flexible. Then that doesn't work, and you try to be a squeaky wheel.
Yep. And I mean, I will say, I do miss the days of being the head of social media at a really big company because being a squeaky wheel was a lot easier then.
Yeah, absolutely. Sue, have you heard of this thing called AI?
Chat something? No.
Well, how are AI and automation changing the landscape of social as a whole, and then more specifically related to security and governance?
Yeah, it's a good question. I recently attended Digital Summit Chicago. I talked about social media audits there. And half the sessions, half of them were about AI. And I was like, whoa, okay. As most people know, AI is being integrated into all the social media platforms. So it's kind of a little bit of like, even if you're not on board, you're going to have to see it, and there's no way to turn it off or opt out. And so in that way, AI is becoming really prolific. Yeah. Now, I don't know, there's no statistics out there that I've seen, but I would like to know how many people are using it, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like they put it in the platform who knows if it's being used effectively, being of value to people.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea, right? But darn it, the social platforms really got excited and pushed it all into the platform, didn't they? As far as security goes, I think there's about to be a massive reckoning. Of course, I've been saying this about social media too, but I think we're on the precipice of a massive reckoning of how do we govern all this AI stuff. I was having a really interesting conversation with some of my friends about how a company could possibly claim IP trademark rights to something that a human didn't think of.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of that. A lot of my colleagues in comms departments are like, AI can help us with all the minutia and all the little dirty, busy work. And I'm like, yeah, but be careful. The minute you let a computer just write your brand, like, that's a problem, to me at least. I might be old school, but I don't trust the computers, and I do fear the uprising. So.
It is a challenge. I was in a session with a leadership group that I'm a part of, and we were talking to an AI engineer. I think he's the head of AI for Target, and he actually shared that something that they're doing with image generators like Midjourney, Wall-E, or DALL-E, and the other popular ones. They're actually using principles of lithographs to create and use that piece of metadata to tie in. So they're able to attribute some sort of ownership.
See, that's
to
what
what's
I'm
being
saying.
created.
Companies that are on the ball are thinking about that stuff.
Yeah.
Companies that aren't. And it's kind of like there has to be some sort of shaking out. It's just like the overall social guidelines for regulated industries, right? If you're in pharma, if you're in medical, and by the way, medical systems are among the most hacked companies in the world. If you're in any of those regulated industries, you have to be thinking along those lines already, right? How do we automate it? How do we secure it? How do we record it so that we have a record in case we get sued over it? Like, all that stuff has to be figured out.
I think I have a letter via snail mail within the last month that came to my house from a large financial institution that had a data breach.
Yeah.
We were unaffected, but like, it's wild is how that was just normal.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, I got a letter from Wells Fargo. Oh, there was a data breach.
Right. I mean, does anyone actually sign up for the free year of credit monitoring? Like, no. We're just all so used to it.
Can you share an overview, some common pitfalls or mistakes or even trends that you're seeing as it relates to security? So
within the corporate world, the number one mistake I see is we have all of our passwords. First of all, if they have all of their passwords,
right.
But we have the passwords that we know in an Excel spreadsheet that is not protected by anything, that has been emailed around the company. That
it's printed off right
next
to your
it's under my keyboards for easy access, right? It's that kind of thing, and then I have people say, well, we keep ours in a password protected PDF. And I'm like, yeah, and then you email the PDF to the person with what? The password. And so all of that mechanism is really, really bad for social. It's how a lot of hacks happen.
Yep.
And it's honestly very insecure. So, I highly recommend companies invest in a password manager. They're not that expensive. They will save your bacon in a lot of ways from a governance standpoint. My two favorite are Keeper Security and 1Password. Okay. And I'm going to have a really bold hot take. I no longer recommend LastPass. They've had too many security breaches for me to be comfortable.
Funny. Sample size of 1. Breakthrough was on LastPass, and we migrated to Keeper.
Good. Keeper's my favorite.
I would also say Eric, one of our project managers, kind of fulfilled that governance role internally for us.
Sounds like he's doing a good job.
He's doing a great job, and he's needed to help me more. Like, transitioning, like getting onto a password manager or transitioning from one to another, it's a lot of work. I think he set up stand-ups and working sessions and even did some training for our team. So just note to the audience, like, getting on those systems is, one person can do it, but it's a lot of work, and it's hard.
Yep.
And setting it up appropriately is going to yield you so much, you're going to save so much time and headaches.
Yep, and I will tell you, all of the things that come across my desk that are like, we had an employee leave and they still have access to the Facebook page.
Yeah.
We had an employee go under bad terms and they know the Twitter password. It's like, well, all of this mechanism will help you avoid those situations and therefore limit risk, right? Which is the whole point of governance. So number 1's passwords.
Okay.
Number 2 is not owning all your stuff. Right? Like there's a lot of times, this applies both in terms of channels that we've just lost control of and we don't own them, and the Wild West. And it also relates to allowing, this is so bad to say in the middle of an agency office, but allowing your agency to own your accounts. My philosophy is your company always owns your stuff and you provision your agency partners with access.
Yeah, not bad to say in Breakthrough. We are always even when we're setting up new channels, if it's an ad account, if it's a social account, an email platform, we're setting them up with our clients as the owners.
Yep.
We're granted admin access.
That's
but
the way it should be.
We don't want that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you should always own your channel, your asset, grant
your ad
stakeholders,
accounts,
your
everything.
vendors.
Yes.
Grant your agency or stakeholder access.
Yeah, that's a huge mistake that a lot of big companies make, you know. And I won't name names here, but there are some large agencies that will gladly accept ownership of your stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be well intentioned, but it becomes precarious if someone leaves, if there's a transition. There's a lot of things that can happen.
You're one step removed from control of your own stuff, which I don't like at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, password and security is one.
Yep.
Ownership is two.
Yep, and then 3 is hit by a bus. You have to prepare for what happens if your one social media person gets hit by a bus. And so there have to be SOPs. There have to be written records of how we do this, right? There has to be access to passwords, which, by the way, a password manager would help you with. You know, there has to be enough knowledge across the team. Like at Cargill, my rule was everyone on the team had to be able to do everybody else's job okay. Like you didn't have to be as good at it as the other person, but if that person was out sick,
if you need to gut it out, you can gut it
or
out.
if I just have one of those days where I have to divide and conquer, right, and shift people around, like I want everybody to be able to slot in, right? And so you have to have a backup in case Sue gets hit by a bus, you know?
So to our C-suite audience viewers, or to the lowly, single, overworked social media manager
who's watching this while doing 18 other things.
We've got your back. You can watch this at 1.5 speed. It's okay. We've got your back. Sue, if people wanted to get in contact with you, pick your brain, or if they've succumbed to a social crisis, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Website cernasocial.com. I'm Sue at Serna Social. It's pretty easy.
Thank you for your time and
Glad to be
perspective
here.
and insights as always. Thank you for joining us for another episode of our Green Velvet Chats. Sue, thank you for sharing your time, talents, and expertise.
My pleasure.
We're going to go on a quick pause because I believe I have a cartwheel to perform. Stay tuned.